if you just look around today, the market for self-inflicted discomfort is, well, it's absolutely booming.
It really is.
We're talking about people voluntarily choosing to suffer, not for, punishment, but for health, resilience, and this idea of personal mastery. You see these seemingly rational, intelligent individuals willingly plunging their bodies into freezing tanks of water.
Yeah, whether it's a repurposed bin in the backyard or a $1,000 bespoke ice bath.
Exactly, parked right next to a luxury car. It's become this status symbol of voluntary hardship.
It's the ultimate pursuit of voluntary discomfort, isn't it? And you're right. It's not a new concept at all.
No.
I mean, you look back to the Roman Empire, their public bathhouses, the famous thermae, they always finished with the frigidarium.
The cold plunge.
A basin of icy cold water. But today, the narrative has shifted. It's digital. It's driven by biohackers, wellness influencers, athletes, promising this total health optimization.
And the consumer frenzy is just, it's off the charts.
It has skyrocketed. We saw data from just a few years ago showing some online retailers with a staggering 90-fold increase in ice bath sales.
90 times in a single year.
In 1 year.
That level of demand, that suggests a massive belief structure around this whole practice.
It does.
But the critical question for us, for you, is this. Is this just a feel-good ritual powered by willpower and, community hype? Or is there truly measurable, scientifically proven physiology behind the deep chill?
That's the question.
Our mission today is to do a deep dive into the core research, the peer-reviewed literature on cold adaptation, recovery, mental resilience, to really figure out what works and where the science stops and the immense power of belief kicks in.
And to start, we really have to define our terms.
Yeah.
Because the different methods have vastly different impacts on the body.
Right. Not all cold is created equal.
Exactly. So we're mainly looking at 3 categories based on the sources we analyzed. First, you got your cold showers. The literature generally defines that as water at or below 15 degrees Celsius.
Which is about, 59 Fahrenheit?
Around 59 Fahrenheit, yeah. Then second, you have cold water immersion, or CWI. That's the full-body plunge athletes use, typically between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius.
Okay, and the duration is key there.
The duration is critical, usually 3 to 10 minutes.
And then on the really extreme end, you have cryotherapy.
Correct. And that involves exposing yourself to ultra-cold air in a controlled chamber. It can go down to minus 110 to minus 140 degrees Celsius.
Which sounds absolutely insane.
It does, but it's only safe because the duration is so short, maybe 2 to 4 minutes. And critically, because it uses air.
And that distinction between water and air, that's fundamental, isn't it? It's not just a subtle difference in how cold it feels.
Oh, it's the difference between a brisk walk and jumping off a cliff, physiologically speaking. And it all comes down to thermal conductivity.
Right.
Water's thermal conductivity is about 25 times greater than air.
25 times.
And that's the key physical principle. It explains why you can step into a cryo chamber at minus 110 Celsius for 2 minutes with, minimal surface cooling, but 5 minutes in 10-degree water can be physiologically intense, even dangerous for someone who's unprepared.
Because the body is just losing heat so much faster in the water.
So much faster. And that rapid, intense transfer of heat out of the body, that is precisely what drives the immediate, profound physiological response we call the cold shock.
That rapid, intense signal of danger, that's where this whole thing begins. So let's jump into the biology of that initial stress response.
So we have to start with this concept of hormetic stress. It's really the foundational principle, both philosophically and biologically, that underpins all the claimed benefits.
Okay.
And the concept separates 2 types of stress. You've got chronic, toxic stress, the kind that just damages your systems, floods you with cortisol long-term, leads to burnout.
That's the stress of a terrible job or never getting enough sleep.
Exactly. That's unequivocally bad for us. But hormesis suggests that repeated moderate exposure to acute stressors like cold or heat or even certain intense exercises can produce these profound positive changes.
So the stressor is like a dose-dependent poison.
That's a great way to put it. Too much is harmful, but just enough forces an adaptive, strengthening response.
It's like resistance training for your internal defense systems. You don't get stronger sitting on the couch. You get stronger by intentionally taxing your muscles for 30 minutes.
Precisely.
So what is that immediate, overwhelming, and maybe a little alarming response when you first plunge into that 10-degree water?
That is the cold shock response. And it is rapid, profound, and completely involuntary. It's the immediate activation of your sympathetic nervous system.
Your fight or flight system.
Your fundamental fight or flight response, yeah. It's designed to alert you to a severe environmental threat.
Yeah.
And you see these immediate significant increases across several metrics.
Yeah.
Heart rate skyrockets, blood pressure surges, sometimes acutely increasing your systolic blood pressure by 20 to 30%. Your respiration rate goes way up, which leads to hyperventilation or that classic sharp gasp.
Right, that involuntary gasp you can't control. Your body is just screaming, "Get me out of here."
It is. It's overriding your conscious control. And accompanying that physical shock is this massive and measurable neurochemical response.
Okay.
Cold exposure triggers a profound surge of norepinephrine. This is the primary fight-or-flight neurotransmitter. It's critical for vigilance, attention, alertness.
And the surge is significant.
The research shows that even moderate cold exposure can cause plasma norepinephrine concentrations to increase by 200 to 300%.
300%.
And crucially, this elevated state, this heightened sense of alertness and mood, it can persist in your system for several hours after you get out of the water.
So if you're looking for a natural, immediate, and sustained mood boost that lasts long after the shiver fades, that norepinephrine dump is the mechanism.
Absolutely. The release of this potent cocktail of catecholamines is linked to huge psychological effects that are alertness, mood elevation, enhanced focus.
And this involves the brain's core stress centers.
Oh, heavily. The amygdala, which processes threats, the locus coeruleus, the main source of norepinephrine for the brain, and the hypothalamus, which is like the commander-in-chief of the whole stress response.
So it's a total full system alarm that just goes off instantly.
Yes. But here's the fascinating psychological consequence, and this ties back to that idea of mastery, that acute physiological arousal is often so overwhelming that it forces you into the present moment.
Right, you can't ruminate.
You can't. The sheer intensity of the cold, the need to control your breathing, it makes it impossible to worry about your meeting next week or an email you forgot to send. It's a compulsory focus, similar to some high-focused meditative states.
So the theory is you're training your willpower.
Some researchers believe so. That by repeatedly confronting and overriding that instinct to flee, you're training resilience and emotional regulation by forcing your brain to push past profound discomfort in a controlled setting.
That's a powerful idea. Intentional discomfort as a training ground for cognitive control. You're overriding your most basic survival instinct. Okay, given that huge neurochemical dump, let's switch to the claim that's really driven the public conversation. Metabolic health. Does cold exposure actually help you burn fat? And if it does, how much?
So the underlying mechanism is completely real. It's scientifically validated. The process is called thermogenesis, and it happens mainly by activating brown adipose tissue, or BAST.
Brown fat.
Brown fat. And unlike white adipose tissue, or WAT, which just passively stores energy, brown fat is highly specialized. It's packed with mitochondria.
And powerhouses of the cell.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And its entire job is to generate heat without shivering.
So it's basically your body's own internal heating element, the survival mechanism.
That's a perfect analogy. And the system links right back to the cold shock. That norepinephrine that's surging through your bloodstream binds to these receptors on the surface of the brown fat cells.
And that flips a switch.
It acts exactly like a switch. It forces the BAMP to begin non-shivering thermogenesis. This means the baby starts oxidizing glucose and triglyceride stored energy using a special protein called UCP1.
UCP1, okay, that's a bit technical. What exactly is that doing?
So UCP1 is the key differentiator. Normally, mitochondria burn fuel to create a proton gradient, and then that gradient is used to make ATP, which is cellular energy.
Right.
UCP1 uncouples that process. So instead of using the gradient to make ATP, UCP1 provides a shortcut for the protons to run down, and all that resulting energy is immediately released as heat.
Ah, so it's like running the engine without putting the car in gear. You're just burning fuel to stay warm.
Precisely. The body is heating itself from the inside out using stored fuel rather than shivering, which is just inefficient muscle contraction.
Okay, so cold exposure definitely forces the burning of stored energy through this really efficient internal furnace. And there's also the idea that we can grow more of this tissue, right? The Browning effect.
That's the Browning hypothesis, yes. Research suggests that repeated cold exposure might increase a hormone called irisin. And irisin has been shown to promote the conversion of your typical stored white fat into these metabolically active beige or brown-like fat cells.
So you're essentially remodeling your energy storage system to be more metabolically active.
You're making a portion of it actively energy burning instead of just passively storing.
This sounds like a miracle for weight management, but let's bring in the necessary reality check. For listeners who need balanced facts, what does the data say about the magnitude of this effect?
This is where we have to temper expectations significantly, especially with claims of massive weight loss. The current evidence suggests that the increased energy expenditure is, well, it's modest.
How modest.
It might lead to an additional daily energy expenditure of around 100 to 200 kilocalories.
Wait, so we've just detailed this complex, fascinating molecular mechanism with norepinephrine, BAT, and UCP1, and it burns the caloric equivalent of a small apple or half a candy bar.
That is the right critical question to ask.
Is that really worth the discomfort?
Well, the physiological mechanism is powerful, but the caloric impact is modest in the context of your total daily energy balance. I mean, 200 kilocalories a day, every day, that adds up eventually, but it's a slow burn.
It's not a massive overhaul.
Not at all. And this brings us to a huge caveat from the sources, which often counteracts that gain. An increase in appetite has also been reported in studies following cold exposure. Which makes sense, right? The body's priority after spending energy to generate heat is to restore its fuel reserves.
So if you burn an extra 200 calories, but then you subconsciously eat an extra 300 or 400 calories because you're hungry, you've actually moved backward.
Exactly. So the takeaway has to be clear. While B8 activation is a verified response, cold showers or immersion alone are highly unlikely to result in clinically meaningful weight loss. Not unless they're part of a comprehensive strategy.
So they're a supportive tool, not a standalone solution.
An enhancement tool, exactly.
What about other metabolic markers? Did the sources show any other changes, like in cholesterol or blood sugar?
Yes, there were some interesting temporary findings. One study looked at the effects of 3 minutes in a very cold cryosauna, minus 70 degrees Celsius.
Wow.
And they saw no long-term effects on glucose or total cholesterol. But immediately after the exposure, they observed a statistically significant 10% increase in HDL cholesterol.
The good cholesterol.
The good cholesterol. And a corresponding 14% decrease in atherogenic index values, which is a key risk measure for vascular issues.
So acutely, the system is mobilizing fats and lipids more effectively.
That seems to be the interpretation. They also saw an increase in free fatty acids, which suggests the body was actively breaking down lipids for fuel. These acute changes just reflect the body's urgent adaptation process.
Fascinating. So the metabolic system goes into overdrive, but the long-term impact on weight control is modest and has to be balanced against potential hunger.
The science supports the powerful acute shock in metabolic activity, but not the exaggerated narrative of miraculous weight loss.
Let's shift gears then to the world of performance. This is probably the most established use for CWI athletic recovery. What are the proven benefits, and where does that crucial scientific conflict come in?
For elite athletes, for anyone in intense training blocks, cold water immersion is a staple. And the proven benefits really center on two key outcomes: accelerating the recovery of physical function and significantly reducing delayed onset muscle soreness.
DOMS. That familiar deep ache that hits 2 days after a heavy leg day where you can barely walk downstairs? How does cold hack that pain experience?
The mechanisms are twofold. Firstly, you get a powerful analgesic effect. The low temperature literally numbs the pain by inhibiting cold-sensitive nerve endings, specifically the TRPM8 receptors.
It slows down the pain signals.
It slows the nociceptive signal transmission right down. And secondly, the cold water acts as a massive vasoconstrictor. It dramatically decreases peripheral blood flow to the limb.
So less blood flow means less swelling.
Exactly. This reduced perfusion helps inhibit the release of inflammatory mediators like C-reactive protein or CRP, so you get less swelling, less tissue hematoma, and less pain.
So it's both a nerve duller and a swelling reducer.
Precisely. And meta-analyses confirm it works. CWI significantly reduces perceived DOMS, especially in highly trained athletes, probably because they experience more intense microtrauma and a bigger inflammatory response.
This all sounds fantastic for anyone trying to train hard day after day, but this is where we have to introduce that crucial scientific trade-off, this molecular paradox. It helps short-term recovery, but it might actually conflict with long-term training adaptations.
This is the critical nuance. For anyone whose main goal is maximizing strength and muscle size, this is so important. While cold immersion helps you acutely recover for your next training session,
Yeah.
A growing and pretty robust body of evidence suggests that the regular use of CWI immediately after strength training can blunt or interfere with increases in muscle size, muscular power, and ultimate strength.
Wait, hold on. So if you're lifting weights specifically to get bigger and stronger, the ice bath you're taking to recover might actually be working against the growth signal.
That is the conclusion from the molecular studies. Yes.
How?
It comes down to inflammation. Muscle growth requires a signaling cascade that's initiated by the stress and microtrauma of the workout itself.
Yeah.
That localized inflammation isn't just pain, it's a necessary biological signal.
It's the signal for repair and overcompensation.
Exactly, the process that leads to growth. By aggressively shutting down that inflammation with immediate CWI, you risk attenuating the acute anabolic signaling pathways that are required for hypertrophy.
Can you give us a specific molecular example of what's getting muffled?
Absolutely. Molecular analysis has found that post-exercise CWI altered several specific pathways. For instance, they found changes in the phosphorylation of factors like P53 and the content of PHF20. And crucially, they saw changes in the PGC1 alpha axis.
Okay, PGC1 alpha. Can we unpack that for a second?
Sure. Think of PGC1 alpha as the factory floor manager for muscle adaptation. It's a master regulator for mitochondrial biogenesis, creating more powerhouses, and for muscle fiber remodeling.
So it's the thing that gets the build back stronger message.
It is. And if CWI interferes with the signaling that activates it, then the cellular machinery that gets that message, it gets muffled or delayed. The cold, by reducing inflammation and metabolic activity right after exercise, just interferes with those immediate signals necessary for long-term adaptation.
That is a fundamental trade-off. So
Yeah.
what does this all mean for someone trying to make a training decision?
It means your timing and your goals matter hugely. If you're an endurance athlete, a cyclist or a runner, or if you're in a competitive season where you just need rapid day-to-day recovery,
Right, to maintain volume.
then CWI is a proven valuable tool. It helps you quickly restore performance.
So you're prioritizing performance now over adaptation later.
Exactly. But if your primary long-term goal is maximizing muscle size or maximal strength, you probably want to skip the ice bath immediately post-session.
So what's the alternative?
The research suggests that just using an alternative method, like low-intensity cycling active recovery or just passive rest, was comparable to CWI for minimizing inflammation, but without that molecular blunting effect.
So maybe wait a few hours before the cold plunge?
At least several hours, yeah. Let that initial inflammatory signal do its job.
That's a huge differentiator for anyone spending time and money on ice baths thinking they're maximizing all gains. The decision is immediate performance or long-term size and strength.
Knowledge is power. The data forces you to be strategic.
Okay, moving on from muscle, let's explore one of the more exotic claims we found. The idea that cold can train your body to handle entirely different types of stress. The concept of cross-adaptation.
Cross-adaptation is a fascinating area of resilience research. The definition is repeated exposure to one specific environmental stress. We call that the homotypic stressor, like cold, results in adaptation to a completely different, novel stressor.
The heterotypic stressor.
Right. It suggests the body's internal defense systems are interconnected and you can train them.
So training in the cold might make you better equipped to handle something physically unrelated, like low oxygen at high altitude, or maybe even a psychosocial stressor, like a deadline at work.
That's the theory. And there is some physiological evidence supporting it. We see reported cross-adaptation between altitude and heat stress, and critically for us, between hypoxia low oxygen environments and cold stress.
So let's zoom in on that cold to hypoxia link. You're saying adapting to cold makes you physiologically calmer when dealing with low oxygen, which is a massive stressor.
The human data is a bit sparse, but there is one key experiment that tested this. Researchers wanted to see if repeated short cold water immersions could change the physiological response to hypoxic cycling exercise.
And what did that experiment find?
The participants did 6 5-minute cold water immersions at 12 degrees Celsius over 3 days. Then, when those cold-adapted people cycled in a low-oxygen environment, simulating high altitude, they showed a significantly reduced sympathetic nervous system response compared to the control group.
That's a strong indicator. It means their heart rates and blood pressure doesn't spike as much. Their body treated the low oxygen environment as less of an emergency.
Exactly. The cold-adapted group showed less internal stress when dealing with the challenge. It suggests the adaptation isn't just local to the skin or muscles, it's training the master control system, the autonomic nervous system, to stay calmer and less reactive when confronted with other severe strains.
It really supports that core principle of hormesis. Controlled adversity forces an upgrade to your body's internal stress defenses.
It makes them more robust against future novel adversities.
So it sounds like the key benefit isn't necessarily the cold itself, but the repeated training of the nervous system to remain voluntarily calm when your body is screaming panic.
Precisely. You are developing a generalized tolerance to physiological threat.
Which naturally leads us to the psychological benefits. Beyond muscle and metabolism, the most cited benefit of cold exposure is its profound impact on the mind, reducing anxiety, stress, depression.
Let's start with the acute effects. They're well documented and tied directly to that norepinephrine surge we talked about. Short-term, head-out CWI significantly increases positive affect.
Which is that feeling of being enthusiastic, active, alert.
Energized, yeah. And at the same time, it reduces negative affect feelings of distress, nervousness. This immediate mood lift is powerful and very consistent across studies.
And this isn't just people saying, I feel better. There's a neurological correlate, right? We can see it with brain imaging.
That's right. Studies using fMRI have shown that this improved positive affect is associated with measurable changes in functional brain connectivity. Specifically, researchers saw increased interaction between three large-scale brain networks: the default mode network, or DMN, the salience network, or SN, and the frontoparietal network, or FP.
Let's quickly define those. DMN is when your mind is at rest, right? The rumination network.
It is, yeah, self-referential thought. The salience network is the brain's alarm system. It detects important stimuli, like the shock of cold water, and decides what to pay attention to.
And the frontoparietal network.
That's cognitive control, executive function, maintaining attention.
So when the cold hits, the salience network screams alarm, and the increased connectivity between all three suggests a highly regulated, focused response.
Exactly. The enhanced connectivity suggests CWI facilitates better focus and attention on your emotional state, which contributes to that immediate mood boost. It potentially helps shift the DMN away from negative internal loops.
Speaking of rumination and mental health, one of the most interesting studies involves the Wim Hof method, which combines breathing, cold showers, and commitment. What did that trial find?
This was a compelling trial because it focused on a clinical population, women with elevated depressive symptoms during the pandemic. They randomized them into two groups, the WHM group and a very rigorous active control group.
And what did the control group do?
Slow-paced breathing and took warm showers. The expectation, based on all the hype, was that the cold would provide superior results.
But the results were surprising.
Very surprising. Counter to predictions, both groups showed equivalent and highly sustained improvements in mental health. After just 3 weeks, both groups reported significant comparable reductions.
How much?
A 24% reduction in depressive symptoms, 27% in anxiety, and 20% in perceived stress. And remarkably, these improvements held at the 3-month follow-up.
That is a profound finding. It strongly suggests that for broad measures of depression and anxiety, the breathing, the routine, and the expectation of improvement, all present in the warm shower group, were just as powerful as adding the stress of the cold.
It absolutely does. The study also found that both conditions resulted in lower peak cortisol reactivity to a lab stressor. So both interventions helped normalize the body's stress hormone response.
But there was a specific, unique benefit to the WHM group, wasn't there?
There was. And this is what distinguishes the cold component. The WHM group reported a significantly greater reduction in daily stress rumination compared to the control group. So while overall depressive symptoms improved equally, confronting the physical adversity of the cold seemed to have provided a unique mechanism of psychological resilience, specifically buffering against those negative repetitive stress thoughts.
So, if you feel overwhelmed by anxiety or low mood, breathing and ritual are immensely powerful. But if your specific struggle is being hijacked by cyclical negative thinking, adding that hormetic dose of cold seems to specifically train your brain to resist that rumination loop.
That is the most nuanced interpretation of the data, yes.
This evidence leads us directly to the elephant in the ice bath, the incredibly powerful role of belief, ritual, and expectancy. Because CWI is so intense, how can researchers ever truly separate the physical mechanism from the psychological power of the placebo effect?
This is the core methodological challenge in this field, and cold exposure is the textbook example. It is nearly impossible to run a true blind study when temperature is the variable.
Right, you can't blind an ice bath.
You can't. Everyone knows which group they're in, which immediately creates an expectation. So researchers have had to get extremely creative using what they call sham treatments to manufacture an expectation of benefit without the actual intervention.
And this brings us to the fake ergogenic soap study.
A brilliant piece of research. They were looking at muscle recovery. They compared 3 groups: a real CWI group, a passive control group, and a third group that got a warm, near-body temperature water immersion placebo.
And for the placebo group, they just told them the warm water was special?
They squirted a specific expensive-looking soap into the warm water and told the participants that this soap contained special recovery enhancement properties that released beneficial compounds through the skin.
They manufactured a compelling story.
Precisely, and the result was striking. The placebo group, believing they had gotten a potent recovery boost from the fake soap, showed a significant 13% improvement in muscle strength recovery 48 hours later.
13%. And how did that compare to the actual ice bath?
That 13% improvement, achieved by pure belief, was nearly identical to the benefit achieved by the actual cold water immersion group.
Wow.
Now, this doesn't mean CWI is only a placebo, but it forces us to acknowledge that a massive portion of the perceived benefits, especially in areas like physical recovery, are driven by psychological commitment and expectation.
The belief that they recovered was as powerful as the physical intervention. That's critical for our listeners to understand.
It is. Remember, in that WHM mental health study, the warm shower group actually expected greater benefits than the cold group, and the general results were equal. We know placebo response rates in, say, antidepressant trials are high, around 30%, because the expectation of improvement is a powerful neurobiological process itself.
So we have to hold both truths. Cold shock is a real physical fact, but if you believe deeply that confronting the cold will make you stronger or happier, that belief is a major part of the outcome.
We must hold both simultaneously. CWI is a potent physiological tool, but its effects are amplified by psychology.
Okay, looking at overall public health, setting aside the intense plunges, what does the data show about just consistently incorporating cold into a daily routine, like a cold shower?
This is where a large, rigorous, randomized controlled trial from the Netherlands gives us excellent clarity. They randomized over 3,000 people to either a control group or one of 3 groups that did a hot to cold shower sequence. 30, 60, or 90 seconds of cold for 30 days.
And with that many people, the conclusions have some real weight. What were they tracking?
The primary outcome was sickness absence from work.
Okay.
And they found that the participants who included that brief cold burst in their daily routine reported a substantial 29% reduction in sickness absence from work compared to the control group.
A 29% reduction in sick days, that's a robust, clinically relevant finding.
It's statistically significant and very meaningful. And crucially, the effect was sustained during the 60-day follow-up period, even when people were just continuing on their own.
Did the length of the cold burst matter? Was 90 seconds better than 30?
Interestingly, no. The researchers found no significant difference between the 30, 60, and 90-second groups. This suggests that the initial acute cold shock, regardless of the minor duration differences, is the key element driving the beneficial effect.
However, that study also had some balancing findings, didn't it? It wasn't all positive.
Yes, and this is important for balancing our expectations. In that same large study, cold showering did not result in clinically relevant changes in quality of life, anxiety, or work productivity.
So it's excellent for reducing time off work, maybe for minor illnesses, but it wasn't a universal mood or performance booster for this large population?
That's the distinction. You compare that with qualitative studies of, say, dedicated regular winter swimmers.
Right.
They often describe the practice as a powerful coping mechanism during periods of intense stress. For these dedicated practitioners, the plunge becomes a valued ritual for emotional renewal.
It sounds like the difference between cold exposure as a mild physiological tweak, the 30-second shower, versus cold exposure as a profound, commitment-driven psychological ritual.
They can both be beneficial, but for different reasons.
Okay, we have covered massive ground here. From the neurochemical shock to the molecular trade-offs in muscle, all the way to large-scale public health. Let's bring this all together.
To summarize, cold exposure is a potent, acute hormetic stressor. Its immediate effect is a massive dump of norepinephrine, which gives you an instant and sustained lift in mood and focus.
And it wakes up your brown fat?
It activates brown adipose tissue, offering a modest metabolic boost, maybe 100 to 200 calories daily, but that's easily counteracted by an increase in appetite, so don't rely on it for weight loss.
And for physical recovery.
For athletes, it dramatically reduces muscle soreness and accelerates acute recovery. It's an analgesic and an anti-inflammatory. And it's a big but. If your goal is maximal muscle growth, repeated CWI right after your session can blunt those long-term adaptations by interfering with pathways like PGC1 alpha.
And mentally, what's the unique takeaway for the mind?
Mentally, it's excellent for an acute mood lift, backed by changes in brain connectivity. And for methods like the WHM, the cold seems to specifically train the brain to better resist stress rumination. That's a powerful, unique benefit.
And on the population level, that robust reduction in sick days.
A nearly 30% reduction in sickness absence from work associated with regular cold showering.
That's a comprehensive body of evidence. Now, before we end, what are the absolutely critical safety warnings?
This is paramount. We have to be crystal clear. Despite the benefits, CWI is not without serious risks, especially for those with underlying health issues. You should never attempt extreme cold exposure if you have pre-existing cardiovascular conditions.
Like heart disease or high blood pressure.
Known heart disease, severe hypertension, severe circulatory issues like Raynaud's disease. That initial cold shock spikes your heart rate and blood pressure and can lead to adverse cardiovascular events.
And for a healthy person, how long is too long?
For safety, keep plunges short. Limit sessions to 3 to 5 minutes maximum. And be vigilant for genuine signs of hypothermia or non-freezing cold injury, which can cause long-term nerve damage.
What are those signs?
Uncontrolled, profound shivering, persistent numbness, or confusion. Those are signs your body is moving past hormetic stress and into the danger zone. And critically, problems can still happen after you get out as your core temperature continues to drop, so rewarm slowly and carefully.
A great reminder that mastery requires discipline, but also profound respect for your physiological limits.
Absolutely. The science is not advocating for pushing to the point of danger, but to the point of acute controlled adversity.
The final conclusion we can draw from all this is that your body is perpetually striving for homeostasis, for comfort, for balance. But it is only by intentionally confronting controlled, acute adversity, whether that's cold water, deep breathing, or heavy exercise, that you force your internal systems to adapt, upgrade their defenses, and become more robust.
Right. We saw that cold adaptation can yield resilience to a novel stressor, like hypoxia, through cross-adaptation.
It creates a foundational skill.
The skill you train in the ice bath, remaining voluntarily calm under profound physiological stress, translates to improved capacity and less reactivity in other areas of life.
Which raises our final provocative thought for you to chew on. If the ultimate goal of seeking this discomfort is to build resilience to novel stress, to train your nervous system to be calmer under pressure, what other forms of voluntary psychological discomfort could yield the same powerful cross-adaptation benefits as stepping into 12-degree water? Where else are you currently avoiding the necessary discomfort? The hard conversation you need to have, the creative task you keep postponing, the difficult financial decision you're putting off that could unlock your next level of mastery and internal resilience.
The cold water forces you to confront the moment. Where else do you need to stop running, step into the shock, and confront the moment? Think about that as you face your next challenge.